Hello, everyone, and welcome to our panel session. I'm so excited. Thanks so much, Jake and DT, Derek, for joining us today, and for the CMX Summit crew. Thanks so much for putting on such a wonderful event. I've been jumping back and forth between the in-person event and now really getting to kind of sink in and dive deep with the virtual side of the event as well. So it sounds like it's been fantastic on both sides. And so really glad to have you both here. Excited to talk and dive deep into community and the metaverse, but really excited to really talk about community and culture. And so really excited to talk to you, Jake, and really focus things kind of on like the metaverse, and then for you, DT, and to really share more about what you've been building over at Tech Runs and everything going on. So before we get too far into everything, I'd love for you both to just kind of share some brief introductions about yourselves, what projects you're currently working on, and then we'll go from there. So Jake, maybe I'll have you start.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Kalah. Great to be here. Super excited to chat with you all. So my name is Jake Steinerman. I'm the head of community at Spacial, or Spacial.io. We're a platform that allows anyone, if you're an artist, a musician, a mom and pop shop, whatever you are, to create your own 3D space in the metaverse. No need for any virtual land or real estate, and you can be, as you are, as your avatar, and represent yourself how you want to be represented in your 3D virtual space. We sometimes call ourselves the metaverse for culture, but we're a lot more than that. And we'll talk about a lot about that today too.
Awesome. Derek, go for it.
Sure. My name is DT from New York City. I am the founder of DAO Labs. So DAO Labs is a platform that launches, manages, and scales social DAOs at the intersection of culture and community. We recently launched, one of our incubated DAOs is the flagship DAO called Tech Runs DAO, which is the first sports DAO that's ever been existed on the blockchain. Their goal is to kind of like build the ultimate playground in the metaverse at the intersection of sports, crypto, and culture. And I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Wonderful. Well, it's exciting to just talk about, we did a conversation earlier around just kind of like what are some of the similarities and differences between Web 2 and Web 3 communities. But what I'm really excited to dive into is just how really, especially over this last year, with everything happening in the world of like NFTs and Metaverse and all that kind of stuff, how these crypto communities, how these blockchain on-chain communities have really taken over culture. And so also, by the way, happy Merge Day. If anyone doesn't know, yeah, we just moved the Ethereum blockchain, just the engine of that blockchain just transitioned from proof of work into a proof of stake. So very exciting for anyone who kind of knows what's been happening there. But so to talk a bit about kind of the culture, just kind of curious to hear from you, Jake, just to kind of kick us off. Obviously, you just shared that you're over at Spacial, which is a really cool, immersive metaverse platform that allows companies and brands or individuals, artists and creators to create these like immersive experiences. You all have used some and created and launched some new features recently, everything from like Ready Player One to I think you guys have made it so that you can even like live stream into the platform. But would love to just kind of hear like what are some of the updated features that you all have released and what's kind of like spurred that innovation?
Sure. Yeah. First of all, GM, as they say, but good merge. We can now use that today, even though it's the afternoon or evening for a lot of us. So we've been on like a really exciting journey at Spacial, and I think it really speaks to how like Web3 has evolved, but also how the internet's evolving. Just like super brief history for those who don't know what Spacial is. We've been around for 5 or 6 years. We originally were a platform for companies to use as sort of an internal meeting solution, almost like an immersive workplace. You can bring in a 3D model, and like companies like Ford and Mattel could design their products together in an immersive space on a device like the Microsoft HoloLens, an augmented reality headset. And we expanded to other platforms. And just to kind of like the short version was when we added Spatial in a web browser, so you can go right in a web browser, that opened us up to a lot more people. Particularly, it opened us up to artists and creators and musicians. So we quickly were exposed, our platform got exposed to people way beyond kind of the enterprise world. And what started to happen was, even though we had built a platform for companies, artists had started to bring in their art into like a boardroom template. We had a virtual boardroom, and people would bring in their art to show off, just to create like their own galleries and museums, even though the platform wasn't built for that. And this happened to coincide with NFTs really blowing up around the time that Beeple sold his piece for $69 million, and NFTs really hit the scene. So we started to dive into that more. And then, of course, a few months later, this is last year, 2021, the Metaverse became the hot topic. Facebook announced they're changing their name to Meta, and then everyone and their brother wanted a Metaverse. And we had this platform that allowed people to do that already today. And we had grown the artist kind of use case, or creating these art galleries, these virtual art galleries that anyone in the world can come into. They can look at art together with other people, buy the art if you're interested in it, and then create your own space and hang that art up in your own space. That started to happen so much that we said, hey, we're not going to focus the platform to be for like an internal productivity kind of enterprise use case. We're going to focus it really on the people that are using it and getting actual value out of it, and that being artists and creators, people hosting virtual events, basically doing almost like doing what we're doing, but in the metaverse in 3D. And we really leaned into that, and that started to get us to realize, hey, if you're building a metaverse, try almost treat it like you're building a city, except for the fact that on our platform there's no virtual real estate or plots of land you have to buy. But what I mean by that is, when you're building or revitalizing a city, what is one of the first things that you want to have? It's art and culture, things to draw people to come and spend time and live in the city. And I think it's a similar kind of concept when you're creating a space or a new platform that you want people to come into and spend time, and there has to be a reason for them to come. And that's why we've really kind of leaned in to supporting artists and creators, because people are now coming, they come for the art, and then they meet people, and then they come and stay, and they network with those people, they become friends or follow those people, and then they start to create their own spaces. Maybe it's not an art gallery, maybe they're a musician, they're hosting a concert. So we're now rolling out features that kind of continue to support that vertical, basically allowing you to rolling out profiles in a couple of weeks, allow people to connect and follow one another, so you can see when someone creates a new space. Rolling out new, we're actually, one of the things we just announced today, and we're opening up next week, is a beautiful space template that anyone can use, that was designed by a former Zaha Hadid architect. That's really focused on, when we worked with them on designing it, it was the kind of goal was, what would a community space in the metaverse look like? And if you go on Spatial's Twitter at Spacial XR, you'll see the video. It's a beautiful space, and we can talk more about it later, but really building out features that allow people to connect with one another and discover each other's creativity in these 3D spaces.
Yeah, I saw it on LinkedIn. I think I saw like a little promo video on LinkedIn today, and it had like these cool little like looking like glow worms in the air and stuff like that. And so very cool, very cool. Well, DT, I'd love to hear from you and just kind of learn about what you're doing and what you're building at Tech Runs. I know that's one of many communities that you're building, but if you could just kind of share with everyone what it is that you're building and how you're building culture and community. I don't want to give it away, but I was going to say in real life. So I'll let you share more.
Sure, no problem. I think before I even share what I'm building, I'll share a little bit about like why I'm building what we're doing, and like kind of give people this stepping stones there, because I think a lot of people can relate to the background in this and how we stacked our experience to actually build this way. So a little bit about me, like I'm a former athlete myself. I played college basketball, went overseas, and did a little stint in the G League, in the NBA piece. But when I hung up my jersey, I joined product at Tesla. And while there, I learned about the power of equity, right? I wasn't taught it before then. It was, my first experience in it. And I spent, I'm talking $44 a share, early Tesla, where it was one product on the road, 19 states were still banned. And then what I learned is through community and through the power of shared interests, and as well as, having people have shared upside, right, in the community. That's how we were able to retain employees, one, and two, when we were going up against the GMs of the world and the Fords of the world, what really made it powerful is because we had a North Star. People knew that they were buying this car and it was because of sustainable energy and a sustainable future, right? And when I left there, I joined Port Private Equity, where I got into finance. In 2017 is where I kind of like got my first taste of crypto. And then is when I started to understand the power of the token. And then what I recognized thereafter is the power of speculation, and how people they saw this as a economic empowerment tool, in where they can buy and sell. But the moment we went through a cycle that we're actually going through right now, that's when I recognized there was something more powerful than speculation, and that was social capital. And in order to get to social capital, I had to think really clearly how, the first question is like, this place of Web3 is very difficult for so many people, and it's happening today. How do I take the information and the knowledge, the experiences that I had, and stack them and help, the next, billions of people get into this world? And what I noticed is that when you ask the question, if instead of onboarding the masses into Web3, what if we can bring the Web3 down to the masses by doing things that people natively understand and embedding the infrastructure of blockchain into those native activities? And that's what Tech Runs came about. So DAO Labs being a incubator for these social communities, these launchpad for these social communities to actually build them, help them scale. What we recognize is that there was a lot more community building that needed to happen and fostering than just opening up the doors to allow that to happen. So that said, we built Tech Runs, which is a sports club. And that sports club created an opportunity for 10 members to play sports and get to connect and be in proximity with one another so that serendipity can happen. And through the growth of that over a few years, we partnered with FTX, we partnered with several other major brands to eventually become the Soul House meets the NBA, right? The NBA Summer League. And that type of model of bringing people together to curate ideas with like-minded professionals, of entrepreneurs, investors, and creators. What we saw there is that normally when we put people in proximity, we had co-learning, co-building, and co-investing. So on the sideline, this is where $4 million were invested on the sideline. 7 people got new jobs. And what we started to see is that type of action continue to happen. So to date, we are now looking to acquire a sports complex together. And that's, in its final stages. So there's levels of work that can be done together. And what we did is we brought together business culture and sports culture. So what we need to understand is that when we're talking culture, it's about the understanding of taking something, an element that people thrive and dive around, and using that shared experience to actually find other people that with those that shared experience, and then drive home some of the ways in which they can pool their resources together for positive some outcomes.
100%. And it's cool because, DT, we had a chance to connect and have dinner in New York a few months ago at NFT NYC. And at that dinner, it was so much fun because we just got to experience and live out this idea of community in real time. Right. And I think it was from that dinner, somehow the right neurons kind of just collided at the right time, and just kind of this idea of proximity equals serendipity. That's right. And that's been one of those things that has just stuck with me from that dinner ever since. And I think about whether it's happening in person, whether it's happening on a platform like Bevy, whether it's happening in the metaverse, in a space like Spatial. I think that's ultimately, at the end of the day, that's the core fundamental goal, is to leverage these different mediums to inspire connection. And from that connection, from those moments of spontaneous combustion, these magical moments kind of come from that. And so It's so cool to see, Jake, how your team and what you guys are doing with Spatial to facilitate those connections. And then obviously what you're doing, DT, with the Tech Runs group and even the yoga group, and just like people feeling like in their, facilitating places where people feel naturally like good and they feel healthy, and just kind of engaging those components of people. Clearly, I like to talk my hands here as well. I'm feeling it. Well, let me ask you this, like,
Sure.
Oh, go ahead. Did you want to respond?
Oh, no. I was just going to say that, it's really interesting that we're talking about two different mediums right now, right? Spatial is this virtual space, right? This virtual world. And but mind you, I like to talk about the metaverse because you're right. I think you definitely nailed it on the head earlier, man. When you think about the metaverse is not necessarily a virtual space. It's actually a point in time when your virtual identity becomes, as critical or more important than your physical identity, right? So it's this collide of different worlds, and where Spatial is doing phenomenal work of like providing these virtual spaces so that people like I and my communities can actually come in there and convene URL, and actually, no matter where we are in the world, is really powerful. And what we've done is we've taken the physical space and decided to use the virtual technology to when we are separate, to be able to connect from there. But the key thing that we're focused on when we're in person is that connectivity. How can we forge meaningful relationships there? So both sides are building cultural, paradigms in their own way. And I just wanted to share the distinction of the two and how they're working together culturally.
Yeah. And just to extend on that too, it's about, I think, two things, right? It's about access to things you wouldn't necessarily have access to before. That's, I think, what you're building, Derreck, and what we're building as well. People can access things they couldn't access otherwise, whether it's in the virtual space. Obviously, like the things you're doing in like the sports arena and stuff like that, obviously you need like the physical activity and to be there in person for certain, but to engage with the community and having a venue, kind of a home to go to, you can do parts of that virtually. And then the other part is, I think what you have a lot of experience in, and what we're trying to push for too, your time starting back with Tesla and all the way to now, is one thing I've tried to mimic, we're trying to mimic at Spatial. It's having a mission, right? I think that's why so many people latched onto Tesla early on. I know why I did too. It wasn't, Tesla and the stuff you're doing now, just Tesla as an example, wasn't like, hey, we're trying to build like the most badass electric car. The mission is we're trying to convert the world to sustainable energy. And I think that was like a mission that a lot of people could attach themselves to. I think that's really important when building a community, is having a mission that like people can come together on. For us, it's, people coming together because they want to build the future of human connectivity and the internet in Web3, and having a place to do it. So I think, accessibility and like a really clear mission are like two really key points in building communities in Web3.
Right on.
Awesome. Well, I'm curious to get your thoughts here. Traditionally this CMX Summit has been a conference for community professionals, and historically kind of in the Web 2 space. And so I asked this question earlier, so I'd love to get both of your thoughts on this. But what are a couple things that you think that the Web 2 community has to offer and can teach Web 3? And trust me, I know that the list is there's plenty of things, but specifically from like the angle of community management and facilitating and growing healthy communities. I'd really be curious to hear your guys' thoughts on that.
Sure.
Yeah, Derreck, do you want to?
Yeah, sure, no problem. I'll share room, but my thought process is, what we're doing here is we're leveraging the Web3 technology of, like Web3 is certainly in a very big way about ownership. And for us, it's about economic empowerment. It's about self-sovereignty. It's about legacy. And when you're thinking about community building, we're thinking about a world where it's not really about the quantity here, it's about the frequency. And by frequency, I'm talking the way in which we have meaningful connections, the way in which we have a shared vision, as we mentioned earlier, the way in which we can cultivate an identity as a collective, right? When you think of people such as, let's use Nicki Minaj, right? Who's a pop star out there, and she has the Barbs, the Barbie groups. That addendum, that group, the Barbs, has a cultural identity. They have a language, they have a voice, they have a way to kind of like operate and function. Same thing goes with Beyonce. Beyonce has the Beehive. That Beehive community.
Intense, by the way. Like
Very-
they could go toe to toe with the Bitcoin maxis.
Anybody. No, absolutely. And then you even have Mariah Carey, who had the Lambs, who catapulted her career. Yeah. These are people that hold, a shared interest, a shared value, a fandom, or whatever the case may be, that has, some sort of, badge, right? And they wear a badge on it. So the questions that, when you're thinking about Web3 is, what type of badges are you promoting? Like, how do you create a level of aligned incentives, right? So when you join a Web3 community, by buying that membership pass to Soho versus Tech Runs, the difference is there's a shared cap table, there's a shared bank account, and there's a shared group chat. Versus at Soho House, there's a shared space that you leverage, right? But there isn't, like, I don't share in the upside, nor do I share in the decision making of how the space is cultivated and curated. So giving us a voice allows me to go out there and actually promote and bring more people into Tech Runs. I would do that with Soho House, but not necessarily because I don't have ownership there. So that's one area in which, I'll tackle, and I'll pass it off to you, man.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, like the things thinking about, I think some of the things that we can benefit from in Web3 moving to Web2, and we think about this all the time, especially, as we're actively kind of building out a Web3 social network, we're very kind of cognizant of that, and we're trying to think of what are the things, like you kind of asked, like that we can bring from Web2, but like lose like the bad parts, right? Like we have an opportunity to finally shed some of that stuff. I think the things that we're really excited about for Web3 are kind of really two things. One is the authenticity and ownership. And Derek, you kind of talked about the ownership piece, but like the ability now that you can express yourself in three dimensions, really, and express your identity in new ways and own that identity, right? We haven't even really talked a lot about kind of NFTs and decentralization, but there's a lot of owning the content that you bring into that space, and a lot of that content and data is it's not just going to be a single profile picture. It's literally a full body avatar. It's literally the space that you inhabit, this 3D space, and so it's allowing people to I think express themselves in a totally different way. And I think hopefully now that people will be coming into spaces as full body avatars, and you're sharing, especially when you do this in kind of in a headset and virtual reality, one day when everyone's doing it that way, and you have the sense of presence with other people, it hopefully we want to drive actions that are more authentic, because you're sharing that you're talking to someone face to face. Hopefully you're not going to have that same reaction. You can have more authentic conversations with people. You can interact with people more closely. Hopefully we can lose some of the nastiness that exists in parts of Web 2 and have those more authentic experiences. And then to the other point as well, in terms of ownership, like people can own the things that they do in that space. They can own it more closely without having to rely on worrying about their data being sold or this or that. I think it's a very different avenue for how we ultimately interact, kind of moving into that third dimension. Hopefully the best parts of like the internet being able to connect with each other, but with also the benefits of sort of like the sense of physical presence, I think are really exciting.
100%. Yeah, I think that I'm personally, I participate in a number of different like metaverse environments, both ones like Spacial, where we're really get to express ourselves from a creativity standpoint. Others where I own different parcels of land. Lots of plenty there. We are not in short supply of profile picture NFTs out there. But it's fun to be able to express yourself in these different ways, and to, I think what you said, like the ownership over your identity, right? right? Like those are like, I had a panel earlier today with Justin and Charles, who are both like in the gaming space. And so for anyone who may or may not know, Vitalik Buterin, who's one of the co-founders of the Ethereum blockchain, that was kind of his story, was that he was playing, I think it was World of Warcraft, and he had this like relic or something. You guys might know it better than I do, but he had this thing that he'd worked so hard to earn in the game. And then the game designers decide to like discontinue that feature in the game, and so he like cried himself to sleep. No shame. but point being is that like in these virtual spaces, it's no longer a hobby. It's where we actually like live and really interact with each other in a meaningful way. And so if we're going to end up spending so much time in these spaces, and if we're going to invest so much time, I think that's the thing, is that so many of these communities that are so passionate, you think about Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones and all the shows that are out right now, there's such like deep, fandom and commitment to the stories of these characters. Going to Comic-Cons and these different conventions, that people are like, they feel a sense of kinship with these storylines and these characters, to where how cool is it? Okay, the lights went off. How cool is it for people who are so invested in those storylines and in building? There's a reason why Lord of the Rings got to be as big as it is. Obviously, it's an incredible story, but the community of people who show up for those, book signings and want to participate and continue to build like lore behind, around the stories. It's the communities that make these things as big as they are. And so for the communities to be able to participate in giving so much of themselves back to those brands and back to the creators of those projects through their time and through their vested interest, it's just a sustainable model. Ultimately, I think is what it comes down to where these communities can justify spending so much time and energy. So yeah, go ahead, DT. I don't know if you had something to add to that.
No, I think you hit it on it. Like, we're talking, I mean, just, relevant to the audience, we're talking about community. These are head of community professionals. They understand the value of community, because, right now communities are the spaces that are saving companies at this point. When you really think about it, like, I mean, I can say it firsthand at Tesla. That's what it is all about. We spent, I think it was $6 per car on advertising. So we spent very, very little advertising dollars trying to promote to people. Most of it with word of mouth. So, and today, tech runs and most of the communities that we build, we really, really focus on being zero cost of acquisition. We care really about the building of that. And I think what we owe that to is, I mean, you asked the question earlier about Web3 versus Web2 and communities. And I think it's worth sharing like a little bit about like what a DAO is and like how we're leveraging it, why we're focusing heavily on like social DAOs and the value of that versus anything else. So like when you think about like what a DAO is, a DAO, obviously another word of like decentralized autonomous organization, is an internet native like entity with no central leadership, right? And the decisions are made from the bottom up and governed by a community organized around a specific set of rules, and that's enforced by blockchain technology. In a DAO, tokens are used to govern, to share resources, to orchestrate operations in order to pursue whatever that shared goal is. And DAOs, are fully autonomous and are transparent. Like think of there's Carfax, right, where you can see all the transactions that happen on a particular car before you buy it. That's how these organizations are placed, right? So, as they are built, the key thing is they're built on these open source blockchain opportunities, and then anyone can view the code, the smart contract, all that type of stuff. That's all cool. But I think, why we decided to focus on social DAOs, and I think I mentioned some of this earlier, and I think it's worth sharing because anyone that is interested, this is what we do. We actually build these communities and support, the activation to do so. But in the industry that is dominated by speculation, fintech, right? Social DAOs focus on social capital over financial capital. And most of the communities that we're talking about right now have that social element, that Facebook group, that, whatever the case may be, that Telegram group or Discord group. So social DAOs are the natural evolution of group chats where friends become coworkers, right? And where social media turned everybody into a media company, social DAOs are turning every group chat into a digital business or economy. And they challenge what it means to be a part of a community, and it offers a way to kind of lean into becoming part of a digital native tribe. And so social DAOs, they show that there is more to crypto than making a quick buck, and that there is an internet, and that the internet is the best place to kind of like meet and create movement with people with similar interests, right?
Yeah.
So like these are the areas in which, like when we're talking about these communities right now, some of these Googles of the world, and even look at we just had recent news about Starbucks.
Yep.
It's a community that had a community, that had a subscribed community where people were, had these loyalty programs. Like the next wave is like the imagination of these loyalty programs through the use of, NFTs, which can then be the access point to, these tokenized communities called DAOs. So, I think it's worth other people, exploring it, because what it does is it creates shared interests. It allows you to make certain decisions around whether or not you're going to, you're going to, like, having people economically aligned is going to allow them to become your distribution, right? And that's a key thing for most of these companies. So I just wanted to share, how communities can be building, how communities can use this stuff, how we can, convene together, and essentially when the next level will be, the space. That's it.
We need a DAO to keep those lights on.
Oh my gosh, I'm literally, you know what, this time intentionally was like trying to avoid waving my arms in the air, but no, that's, 100%. And I think that, and I think I want to wrap on this one point. I'd love to get both of your thoughts on this, but essentially, as these, a lot of kind of these Web2 companies you just mentioned Starbucks, right? There's also Pepsi, Anheuser-Busch, Nike, a lot of the fashion brands, Vogue, right. Gucci. There a lot of these different groups are dipping their toes, or in some cases diving right into right. Web3. What are some things that you think they should be on the lookout for? At this point, I think we have a good number of companies that have made an entrance. Some really well, maybe some not so well. What would you say are maybe one or two takeaways that would be good advice for these Web2 groups that have communities already, if they're interested in dipping their toes into the Web3 waters?
The advice, I just give one and I'll pass it over to you, man. The first advice is to lean into meet with people like Spacial or DAO Labs. Like we spend a lot of time with those communities, not to kind of self-promote, but essentially that's what we're here for. That's what we built our companies to do, to kind of support those communities. And the second thing is, do some research, like look at the use cases that are currently out there. They're very, very transparent on activity. So I'll pass to you, man.
Yeah, from my end, right, I think don't, when it comes to like Web3, obviously there's a lot of hype around the Metaverse, there's a lot of hype around NFTs, there's a hype around all this stuff. Don't jump in and like create a DAO or create an NFT because everyone else is creating it. Like don't create the Panera sandwich NFT because like maybe it's a like funny headline, but like there has to be real and like inherent value to that. And I think these days, online communities, especially Web3 communities, are very sensitive. They can like sense BS like a mile away. So we're not getting into this space to necessarily sell people something, but leverage the community for their own benefit, right? They can have a lot more say into the organization. And I think it's about giving greater benefit back to the community, and they'll give you benefit back. The way we've built Spatial, we're not a DAO. We're not like, you don't have a token or anything like that. But I think one thing we've done that is very like Web3 centric, and not saying this hasn't been done before, but we've been building the product every step of the way by like community feedback. And I think there's ways we can go further with that if I look back at ourselves and how we can kind of Web3ify that even more. But I think it's the community is more important now than ever is like the one key takeaway. And obviously the audience here, like, that it's like your job. But I think it's becoming even more of, I would say the VP and communities, heads of community roles are even more, should be more executive positions nowadays than they have been in the past. And again, not to like self-promote like you were saying, but I think it's becoming really important because it becomes key to like business value at the end of the day.
Right.
Yeah. I think like just generally speaking, through millennials and Gen Z and now Gen A coming up after Z, there's just a culture shift in consumer behavior. And I think through Web2 with social media and obviously the creator economy that came from that, the democratization of access to the distribution of a large audience have been the incredible things that have come out of Web2. Perhaps on the other side of it, though, is the abuse of individuals' data, right? And that getting used in ways that people, one, didn't know, and then two, don't approve of. And so I think that you've got these kids, I say kids, I include myself, I guess, in that category a little bit. You've got these young adults, and you have these up and coming adults who understand the value of their data as well. And they are not interested in being the product, at least without consent. And so that's, I think, the difference of that, what Web3 brings to the table is an ownership of data, an ownership of participating. If your data is going to be a part of the economic model, then at the very least, having the opportunity to opt in and participate in those economics. And so what I'm really excited about, obviously with you guys and what you're working on again at DAO Labs and creating these micro communities and economies with people who have shared interests, shared values, a shared North Star. And same thing with you, Jake, at Spacial, creating these distributed communities that allow people who aren't in the same area to commune and to find common purpose and have those sparks of inspiration as well. It's very exciting. Obviously, I'm very invested in what both of y'all are doing, and I hope you all have a chance to take a look at Spacial. I'm sure, we can post what you're working on in the chat. There you go, the lower thirds. And then Derreck and DT, what you're working on. You guys should definitely come. There's some major players. So it's crazy. You don't have to be in LA, Miami, or the Bay Area. I'm in Denver, and I'm a part of LA Tech Run. So it's a cool community to be a part of, and it's been a huge even boost for our business. So I'm so grateful for both of you participating and being here with us for CMX Summit. And that takes us to time. And so thanks everyone so much for being here. And that's the end of our panel.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Kalah.